I can't figure out who they are. Stature.
So Ron Speaker.
I do not have time.
No, Ron Speaker is working. I don't know about anything else.
Yeah. Hello, sir. What do you know for the doctor? How are you, sir?
I am awake.
There you go.
About the best I can say.
Things good?
I hate the daylight savings.
Man, y'all are really blocked behind this thing.
I hate the daylight savings.
Oh, I hate it.
You had right to be crazy until you said it.
I've known Al's voice for many years. It's like listening to Bob all summer long. How does John's
Everyone agrees they don't like it, but nobody agrees on which way they want it to change.
I'm sure it's over.
To stay. Probably, but I was in Indiana years ago, when there were counties in Indiana that did not go with the change. And so there was a person who met GCI bus driver. I live in one time zone, and I drive a bus to another town.
Or like China.
Well, I'll tell you what it sounds like, though, is the federal government, more and more people in the federal government.
Absolutely.
So the day may happen. It used to be just ignored, but now there's.
Okay, we got it.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate it.
Well, it used to supposedly save us electricity during the war. That was the whole idea in wartime.
Appreciate it.
And then it just stayed.
Okay. So we're duly connected. That's the main thing, right?
stand back there?
Okay. I assume you're talking to me when you say stand by.
David L. Connick, stand by.
Standing by.
All right, it is 7 o'clock, so I would like to go ahead and call this meeting back to order, please. We do need to do a certification from our earlier meeting. And as I make the motion, I will lead us through the certification. Do each of you certify that to the best of your knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered by the Board of Supervisors in a closed meeting? Mr. Frazier?
Aye.
Ms. Donahue? Aye. Mr. Parrish?
Aye.
Mr. Whitson?
Aye.
And I also. Thank you very much. That takes us back to the agenda. The 2020 Comprehensive Plan Amendment. Mr. Curry, did you have any additional information that you wanted to queue us up with, or does Ms. Summers have something to begin with?
I have nothing prepared.
Thank you. Ms. Summers, did you have anything that you wanted to address on the front end regarding the comp plan?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much.
The planning commission needs to come to order and consider.
Right, well, Gary Light's going to do that and call it from recess back into session.
Oh, thank you very much. We do need to convene the meeting of the planning commission. Mr.
Yes.
Blake.
Thank you, Ms. Chairman. I would like to call the meeting of the Planning Commission back to order. We recessed after, I guess, our regular October meeting. So let's first call that meeting back to order. And also, as a first order of business, we have a request from our chairman, Mr. Connick, to participate electronically as per section 3-4D of our Planning Commission Rules of Procedures. I believe this was discussed at our last meeting, and to get this out of the way, I'd like to request a motion to approve Mr. Collins' request to participate electronically for personal reasons. Such a motion.
Also move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great. So,
Thank you. Thank you all. So how are we going to proceed? Are you going to continue to run it, Gary, or am I going to run it now?
I don't run anything. It's up to Jerry.
I'm glad to run it, or you're.
No, I didn't mean I meant Gary Light.
Yeah, I assumed that I would because of the circumstances, but you are in fact the chairman, so I'll defer to your request on that. I'm glad to run it if you so prefer.
Okay. Well, I'm going to defer to the chairman of the Board of Supervisors. I'm going to, on behalf of the Planning Commission, say thank you for scheduling this joint meeting, and we're at your service to answer any questions or provide any elucidation to any questions or issues that the Board of Supervisors may have. And with that, I defer to the chairman of the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you, Mr. Koenig. I did speak to Mr. Light briefly to ask just that question, if you were planning to lead the meeting remotely for the Planning Commission, which seems sort of awkward because so much is visual cues in a meeting.
Well, I'm watching it on the video, so I can see you all.
Well,
So,
then,
let's try it. If that doesn't work, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Light.
very good, then we're off. So just to move forward, I apologize, I had lost my place in the agenda. We've reconvened and we are on to the public comment portion. If anyone has any comments that they would like to make, please come forward to the microphone, identify yourself by the name and the district in which you live.
For about 3 to 5 minutes, we should be all set. Anyone that wishes to speak, please raise your hand. Yes, Mr. Yao.
Hi, I'm Robert Gallo from the FEMA district. I just would like to thank the Planning Commission for what they've done for the proposed comprehensive plan. I don't know all of it, but I think the proposed plan is a good idea. I think it should be passed. It's not perfect. There's things that can be changed later, but the existing one that we have right now is out of date, and this proposed one would at least give us something that's in date. So again, I thank you all for all the hard work we've done, and I would hope that it gets passed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yell. Anyone else wishing to speak? Yes, Ms. Barsky. Yes, ma'am.
The chairman and the board members.
Could you speak directly into the mic?
Mike.
I don't know if it makes any better.
Makes a difference if I go straight. My name is Yoko Barsky. My husband and I live in the Hampton district. Congratulations on finishing the long overdue review and amendments to the comprehensive plan. The Planning Commission, under the direction of Chairman Connick, completed the heavy task of bringing these draft amendments to life. They have been neglected for 16 long years. It is no way a perfect document, and that's why the Commonwealth requires its review every 5 years or less. This is an updated and far superior document than the 2004 version. Please adopt this plan and make it the base for the future amendments. I'm glad to see some enthusiastic residents last month public hearing who wants to contribute to the comp plan amendments. Let us keep that momentum and we'll start the next review as soon as it is adopted. No need to wait for 5 years. That's the only way to keep the good document up to date and current. Fauquier County updates it every year. The Planning Commission is currently working on bringing the zoning ordinance up to date now. Chairman Koenig is hard at work, but his term is coming to an end at the end of this year. I urge the supervisors to appoint Mr. Koenig for the Planning Commission for at least another year, so he can lead the task. I believe there is an option to appoint a member from at large. As my husband's grandfather used to say, if you don't like the cooking, you become the cook. Who is a better cook for the zoning ordinance review than Mr. Koenig? Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Barsky. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak?
Just to speak, I would declare the public comment period closed.
Thank you, Mr. Lenny.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Lenny. It's this big room.
Yeah. Paige Delaney from Jackson District. I want to say my support for the comprehensive plan as written. I'm not saying it doesn't need some happy to glad it's puppy dogs, but it's much better than it was. I'm very impressed by the maps, the telecommunications and solar restrictions. I think it does a lot to help protect this county the way we have it now. And I want to relate back to the Planning Commission meeting, who's done marvelous work. And that was really pointed out in that first meeting where you talked about maps. That was the best planning session I've ever heard the Planning Commission ever do. You actually started talking about the impacts of what we're talking about. That was great. I appreciate it. I know not everyone agrees with the maps the way they are, but it's much better than it was, and I really look forward to the Planning Commission continuing that work to, one, make the comp plan even better and refine that planning, and getting the zoning ordinances changed so there's actually some meat behind the bones. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lenny. Did I miss anyone else? Thank you. I had thought about the best way to approach this as a joint meeting. It has a lot of participants, and it can get a little unwieldy. And so if it's agreeable to everyone, I would like to go around the table, and for all the hard work that they do, I'd like to hear for each planning commissioner sort of your role and anything that you want to talk about that's important to you in the comp plan. And then go around as supervisors and any questions or concerns or processes we wanted to hear about that maybe we didn't hear about, have an opportunity for some interaction and maybe cross some T's and dot some I's. If that's agreeable to everyone, that's how I'd like to go ahead and proceed.
Would you care to go first and talk about your experience with the student work on the comp plan?
I think I like the comp plan. I've been, most of my contributions related to Chapter 6. And I'm pleased with everybody's.
If you have a mic, I can hear what you're saying.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
I think that mic did not have the top of that mic. Flashing, I don't know that.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. As I was saying, the comp plan has taken a lot of work. I think that there's been a lot of good input from everybody. I'm very pleased with the commission in general. And my my work on it, since you asked about what people contributed, I think my biggest contribution was some changes in Chapter 6. I don't take credit for all of them, obviously, but I just felt like that was an important part to work on. And in general, I'm very happy. I've had some good showings that everybody knows about how we do the maps and how we describe the maps. But other than that, I agree with the plan.
Mr. Shulman?
Well, as the newest member of the Planning Commission, I'm kind of riding everyone's coattails of commissioners that came before us, or before me, and my fellow commissioners that are here now. It was definitely a learning experience, and I think my contribution will be going forward in taking Ms. Barsky's suggestion in mind, these reviews a little bit sooner than 14 years. I've read a lot of comprehensive plans now. I don't think I've ever read one. And I kind of agree with everyone else that it's not perfect, but it's a darn good place to pick up going forward.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Shulman. Mr. Light?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the sentiment expressed by my fellow commissioners and the public. A lot of work has gone into this plan. Experience, been at this a long time, and around this time of year, a lot of the same tension comes in. Do you keep making improvements, or put a bow on this version and move on to the next round of review. I would say I've been paying a lot of attention to the map discussion since the Planning Commission put a lot of work into that and voted to move it forward. When we came up with the idea of the maps, I think one of the breakthroughs was that we tried to base the maps on a current zoning configuration so that it did not come off as though we were drawing a boundary around the major villages. I think that was the best we could do in the time we had. I didn't think we really truly had the time or spent the effort that would be really required to put boundaries around the villages. And since that time, I do think there's been a lot of confusion about the maps, and that troubles me a little bit because I think that confusion will continue. So I think that is the kind of bleeding edge, if you will, of the plan, and I hope the supervisors will take input on that and figure out where we want to go with that. But I do want to thank my fellow commissioners and Chairman Connick for the hard work that's gone into this, and we're here tonight to answer any questions or provide any further background as to how we got where we are today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Light. Ms. Ritchie?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Chairwoman? I'll say that one.
It's always awkward.
Thanks, Christine. So I want to also thank, in addition to others, the Board of Supervisors for the very thoughtful review and consideration you are giving to the comprehensive plan that was passed by the Planning Commission. I also agree that there are a lot of improvements that have been made in this plan, and commend my colleagues for their very hard work on that. I do think there are some areas that still need attention, and because I'm the commissioner from Sperryville, I think the maps are particularly problematic. I've heard quite a bit from my neighbors, very concerned with talk that development is going to be pushed into Sperryville and what these maps mean and what the boundaries mean, what the impact is going to be on the sewer system, what the impact is going to be on our water tables and wells. So I think that it would be very easy to pull these aside and give those a little harder look, but move forward with the rest of the plan. So I am very happy to answer any questions about concerns on that. I've also given, that Mr. Curry is offered some alternatives to those maps, taken the opportunity to try to talk to some subject matter experts on this. And I think that, the concerns about having lack of clarity or definition or clear purpose for boundary lines that we're drawing in the comp plan, I found some agreement there. So anyway, happy to answer any questions on that, but thank you very, very much for this opportunity to answer any questions and speak tonight.
Thank you, Mary Catherine. Mr. Henry?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The comp plan is supposed to represent the vision, general direction of the county.
I'm so sorry. It sounds like your mic may be bad as well. Maybe Mr. Whitson's is functional?
Hello?
I can't hear you at all now.
Okay, I think I can speak louder. I think the general purpose of the comp plan is to provide general direction.
We'll sit, just sit here.
Thank you, Mr. Henry.
I think the overall purpose of the comprehensive plan is to provide a vision, a direction for the county to move in. And I think the county has a view. I think we all share the same view on the direction that we want to take the county, and that is to preserve the resources and the assets and the quality of our life, and to make sure that these are not in any way impaired or damaged. And the policies that move forward out of the comp plan are put together by the Board of Supervisors, and they fill in the gaps and directions that the comp plan kind of indicates. And moving to the discussion that really broke out late in the comp plan was the maps. And I never thought there would be discussion that we had about the maps that would be so confrontational and diversive there, because my years on the Planning Commission and from experiences with other counties, growth is always anticipated around the villages, and the zoning changes when you move from the country into communities where there's more intense residential uses and other services available, things like this. And that's all part of a planning process, whether it's in the United States or Germany or wherever. You want to protect your conservation and agricultural areas and encourage any growth that is going to happen with their services. And unfortunately, or fortunately, we have services available in Sperryville. And it was always pretty clear to me that if something was going to happen, it was going to happen with their services, and that's where it should be. And but it's taken on an attitude here that it's kind of like some people have rose up and like, I'm in these areas and I want the door closed behind me. And the things that we have to keep in mind here is that the comprehensive plan is for all citizens of Rappahannock County. And these include the native people that have been here for generations, and the people that have been here for decades, and the people who have just come here. And we've got to be careful that moving forward that we don't exclude any group to be being able to participate in our community, because when we become exclusionary, that's when we lose the game. And it just worries me sometimes to talk about housing, about any growth whatsoever, and looking at where some of the zoning was placed decades ago. We've got to be careful that we don't become exclusionary here, because that's the one key word that can lose the whole game for us. So that's my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Mr. Connick, as the chairman, did you have some comments to add?
I do. What about Mr. Fraser? Is he going to go, or is he going to just go later?
Well, Mr. Frazier, you're welcome to comment now and later if you like, since you served both on the Planning Commission and the Board.
Excuse me, I'll yield my time to Mr. Conley.
Thank you, sir. Back to you, Mr. Conley.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman, and members of the board, my fellow commissioners. I don't want to take too much time because I think I had an opportunity at the last work session of the board a couple of weeks ago to pretty much go over these topics. But and I really want to thank my fellow commissioners for their very good summaries and excellent analysis of what we've presented. And the two things that I want to bring to the board's attention and also to the members of the public who are there or are listening or will listen is I want to take everybody back to, I think it was October of 2019, the last time the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors had a joint meeting. And at that joint meeting, the evaluation of the Berkeley group was presented by their lead consultant, and I'm sorry, well, he's not here, but I can't remember his name. But I just want to read one of the things that has been, that is in the Berkeley group report that has apparently been the subject of so much controversy. And it's the section entitled Future or Current Updates. Mapping, the first thing that's on there. It's got 3 bullets. The first bullet, use mapping. For example, GIS or tax maps to establish boundaries for the established settlement areas, Washington, Amosville, Chester Gap, Flint Hills, Perryville, and Woodville, close paren, instead of using vague, quote, in or near, unquote, language. Second bullet, include a future land use map to illustrate areas of potential development and reinforce preferred zoning patterns, 15.2-2223, scope and purpose of plan. That's the close paren, that's the reference to the Code of Virginia. And the third bullet, planning district has excellent mapping resources. Well, based on that, even before I got on the Planning Commission in January, the Planning Commission voted to do those very things. We used that we don't have a GIS, so we used our tax maps, which are exactly what the zoning maps are based on, to establish boundaries. And we did several different scenarios with the able assistance of Mr. Mauney, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, down at the Planning District. Mr. Curry and Ms. Summers were really helpful in doing that. And so that's what we did. We got several different things and several different scenarios. We had work sessions. We went over them all at our meetings and discussed the pros and cons, and we went back and forth. And what we came up with is what we came up with. So I know, again, there's been some consternation about it all, but the map in the comprehensive plan don't change anybody's zoning, and they don't provide or promote development. Indeed, they restrict it. So I think that the people who are concerned about the possible growth and development that would result from this are simply mistaken. And so that's not all that's in the comp plan. Those are not the only maps. We have, as I said last time, we have maps of scenic byways, We have maps of all the, updated maps of all the historic places in the county, and those are tied into things like the wireless provisions, that if those designated byways or historic areas are visible, or I guess the other way around, if the towers might be visible from them, or solar facilities are visible from those protected areas, or from the Shenandoah National Park, then stricter standards apply. And there's a lot of new material in there about that. And I agree with Commissioner Kohler and some of the others who at that October meeting of 2019, over a year ago, came to the meeting and said what they had at that point was, it wasn't perfect, but it was good enough. Let's get on with it, and we can always work on it as time goes by and circumstances change. About the maps, I want to add one other thing. Those maps have been under discussion and so forth since pretty much a year ago. And in all that time, other than the maps that are currently in there, nobody else, nobody from the public and nobody from the commission came up with an alternate map and said, let's use this map. So these are the maps that we came up with by consensus, and that's our recommendation to the board. And in closing, or except for questions you might have, I want to read a quotation from Benjamin Franklin about the Constitution of the United States. And it'll just take a minute to bear with me, because I think it bears directly on the question that's before the board. And Benjamin Franklin said, I doubt, too, whether any other convention we can obtain may be able to make a better constitution. For when you assemble a number of men, he left out women, I don't know why, to have the advantage of their joint wisdom, you inevitably assemble with those men all their prejudices, their passions, their errors of opinion, their local interests, and their selfish views. From such an assembly can a perfect production be expected? It therefore astonishes me, sir, to find this system approaching so near to perfection as it does, and I think it will astonish our enemies, who are waiting with confidence to hear that our counsels are confounded like those of the builders of Babel, and that our states are on the point of separation, only to meet hereafter for the purpose of cutting one another's throats. Thus, I consent, sir, to this Constitution because I expect no better, and because I am not sure that it is not the best. The opinions I have had of its errors, I sacrifice to the public good. And he goes on. That's the gist of it. And members of the Board of Supervisors, just like our own American Constitution, which TS has lasted with only about, 25 or 26 amendments in over 200 years, this comprehensive plan not perfect. But it's the best that we as a group have come up with, and the enemies that Benjamin Franklin talked about, we have enemies of Rappahannock too. We have people that want to take advantage of the comprehensive plan that's totally inadequate and totally outdated. They want to take advantage of that for their own profit and their own selfish interest to denigrate the interest of everybody who lives in Rappahannock and loves Rappahannock, like every member of the commission does. I don't have any doubt about that. We don't always agree, but we don't always disagree either. But one thing I'll tell you, it has been a real honor and a privilege to be on the commission after all these years. I finally made it. I'm proud to serve with them. We may have disagreements, but there isn't one person on that commission that I have any doubt about they love Rappahannock County, and they want to preserve it, and they want to keep it the way it is. And the key to doing that is to get this comprehensive plan passed and move on to the other things that also have to be done that are way behind schedule in order to keep our county the way we love it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koenig. If no one from the Planning Commission has anything to add at this time, I would go around and have the different supervisors speak and address any concerns that you may have. Since we started over here before, Mr. Frazier, would you like to go first?
That's something that had to come back from Mr. Connick here. We got all worked out about Ben Franklin. I was hoping to call St. Thomas Jefferson, but, you know, Mr. Connick's actually from Philadelphia. No, I have to agree with him. I believe that the comprehensive plan is way overdue for these updates, and I believe every one of the commission members took it as a personal responsibility that we were going to try to get this wrapped up. And it's true we had disagreements in a couple of areas. A lot of times it's just worth to comment. But I think the maps we reached a general consensus on, I believe we were unanimous on a couple of the maps. And I think it really is about time that we put this to rest and adopt this and move on for our efforts behind the zoning ordinance that needs to be updated as well. So, I mean, I can take questions from those members. I worked this past year, and you, Madam Chairman, would be your previous, I think it was Mr. Parrish the year before that. So we've got a good bit of supervisor involvement in this document right now. And I really think it's time to move on and adopt this in present form with the maps as presented by the Planning Commission. To start with, we can always update the maps.
Very good, thank you, Mr. Frazier. Ms. Conway?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for missing the meeting 2 weeks ago. It was happily on Louisiana, so trying to catch up on this. First of all, I want to thank all the Planning Commission members. I know that you have put in so many hours and have to keep reminding everybody that in general we're volunteers and that you're not taking the money to the bank and going to Atlantic City or something. So thank you for all your efforts. I have a few questions and an addition that may or may not go now, but could go soon. I think a lot of folks here know the Day family. Vincent Day, who is a hydrogeologist, worked on my business and my water and septic. I think he's very well respected in his world. And he actually took chapter 2 and went through it pretty much line by line and made some updates. Some of the information he says was not correct before. Some of it was outdated now that he's trying to bring up to date. And I appreciate all of his efforts, and I don't want to have them ignored. So I know Mr. Curry has a copy of it, the board has a copy. I want to make sure this is submitted for now or later. But it should go into the plan at some point. Mr. Summers, Chief Summers, spoke today at the meeting, and he had 2 comments about the plan, and I may have missed this, so please correct me, but the material of the 80-foot tower, as he said, a wooden tower is one heck of a tree at 80 feet, so I don't know if that was tweaked in any way in the comprehensive plan. And then I think he mentioned something about repeaters, and I missed that part. If somebody could remind me what he was saying, that would be helpful.
I would refer to you, Gary, but I think there's an ordinance changes. Is that correct?
Yes, I think Mr. Summers was referring to microwave dishes, allowing small microwave dishes. I think less than a meter. They are ordinance changes, but once you adopt a comprehensive plan, first step you're going to do when you make an ordinance change to the zoning ordinance is to see if it's supported by the comp plan. And there's a lot of language in the comp plan now about towers and siting of towers and whether that's consistent or not with future plans for 80-foot non-timber towers. You have to consider that. If it's exempted entirely from the zoning ordinance, one would call the question whether that is consistent with all of the protections that were proposed to be added to this plan.
I don't know if we need to move with some recommendation on that in the plan, or...
Well, I do think that's more ordinance work, and I discussed this briefly with Chief Summers, and I think it was during that meeting with Data Stream that this initially kind of came up. I'm not even sure it's correct for us to say that towers should be wooden. I'm very concerned that that's probably not what we mean. We probably mean that towers should be camouflaged. Because if someone put up a wooden tower and painted it bright orange, we would be very upset. But if they put up a metal tower and camouflaged it, we would be fine. So I really think it's a matter of saying what we mean in the ordinance instead of saying what it currently says. And in terms of the other microwave dish, I think that's just something we need to do to get in line so we can qualify for certain programs that are out there. But I don't think it's prohibited to the comprehensive plan language.
I know Mr. Connick was very well-versed in the courtroom when it comes to the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinances, and I think everything I've seen or read links the two together when in court we're trying to justify why someone can do something or not. And so I just want to make sure we don't miss that if that's an easy change for wireless and connectivity down the road. The other thing I have is, I have to say, I knew the maps were going to be controversial. I think out of all the communication I've had with citizens throughout the county, it's about the maps. I personally wouldn't have an issue if we passed everything and pulled the maps for now. And worked on trying to make sure the citizens in all the villages had a chance to actually speak to us in one form or another, just to make sure. I appreciate all the efforts that have gone into this, but I really do like a clear line between what we have today and future growth, separating the two so that it's clearer to me anyway. What our plan is, where we're really focusing from one to the other, not just having the one map. So I think that was all I had.
Thank you, Ms. Donahue. Mr. Parrish?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I mentioned this on the last meeting, I would like to see a line or two in the plan concerning our country stores. They're a big part of the community, and they've been declining in recent years, and a lot of them, some of them would probably like to reopen eventually, or even create new stores. So just a line or two in there that basically acknowledging the importance of our country stores here in the county. I would like to see that. Also, our big hang-up does seem to be the maps. Mr. Henry and Mr. Connick alluded to the fact that it's luckily the situation here in this county, and that is that we all want the same thing. Everybody's in agreement that we want to preserve the county and keep out development and that kind of stuff. So I have this letter from the Berkeley group of September 2019. I think that's the same meeting that Mr. Connick was referring to. And they talk about the maps in in this letter. And I'll quote a short paragraph. It's actually just one sentence. Mapping the extents of acceptable development would provide clear guidance to those considering buying or building in these areas, while declining to map these features allows the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors the freedom to consider the individual merits of a given proposal before deciding if its location is appropriate. So this is what I referred to in the last meeting also, that as long as we have responsible representatives on our boards, we're safe. In the absence of a random lawsuit, but we're safe by considering individual applications, piece by piece. So I'm actually probably in favor of passing this plan without the maps, and then we can start working on this. Could be a long process, these maps, to really get it right. For example, I see no reason why the piece of land in Sperryville within the Woodward Road is not part of the village. I mean, it's right next to the village. It's zoned 5 acres. It probably should be zoned 2 acres. But that's where we want growth around the villages. That's what at least that's the way we've approached it since the very beginning of our ordinances for zoning. And yes, we want to keep the rest of the land as open as possible. So I wouldn't be opposed to just dropping the maps, and as been mentioned, that we're going to start reviewing them sooner than later, work on them when we have more time. The biggest importance for getting this done soon is that we need to move on to our new zoning ordinances. There's some things we need to do, and the sooner the better. So I would love to get this formality behind us and move on to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parrish. I just wanted to say a big vote of thanks to the members of the Planning Commission for all the hard work you've put into the plan this year. I have a lot of faith in the work that you've done. I have a lot of appreciation for the work that you've done. And one of the things I hear most from people in other counties is we voted for our comp plan and something got in there and we're not sure how it happened because they farmed it out and paid someone to do it. I take great pride that we kept it in-house, that we did it, that you all did it, and that I know because you all did it with that sense of dedication and again the shared purpose and love for our county, I don't have those concerns, which is a great joy to me that you all have kept it in-house. On the maps, I was thinking after the last meeting on the way home, thinking about what Mr. Parrish said about the maps were belts. If the lines on the maps are belts, you don't put a belt around something because you want it to grow. You put a belt around something to keep it where it is. So I feel the maps, if we don't have the maps, what do we have? Are we going to put the aerial photos back in there? If we put the aerial photos back in there, we could really
still in there.
So I just question why we would want to proceed without maps. And I think, unfortunately, some of the concerns about maps have been based on misinformation. And it's our job as supervisors and commissioners to take on that piece of education. And that's why I think these meetings are so critical. And we saw that in the last meeting where your chairman joined us, and I'm sorry you all didn't join us. That education is a major piece of the puzzle in building consensus and being happy with the finished product. So I'm very glad that we could all get together tonight. I hope it will prove to be more education. I think a lot of people now understand why we may want maps. And that it is, part of what we were tasked to do after our meeting last year. And I appreciate all the work the Planning Commission has put in on it. And I think it would be a shame not to adopt them. I do have some strategies for the board to move forward with, and we can discuss them once we move through this discussion. I did want to follow through on what Mr. Henry said. I had a great conversation at the Quickie Mart last weekend, as so often happens on weekends at the Quickie Mart. A gentleman was remarking on traveling in Ireland, about how you knew when you were in the countryside and you knew when you were coming into the villages. And I think that's a great sort of way to frame it, that, we want to know where the countryside is, and we want to know where the villages are. And that's it. That's the only feel you have to have for it. And I think to do it based on current zoning is a very responsible way to approach it. And I thank the Commission for all their thoughtful work in this process. Mr. Woodson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just speak quickly, and I think more than anything I'm posing some questions, many of which overlap with some of the questions I raised when we were speaking primarily or only to Mr. Connick as a member of the Planning Commission. So I'd like to hear from whoever can answer each one of these questions. You're all the experts on this and have put in the hard hours and work, and we're arriving to this somewhat late in the process and then have this task of moving forward in 150 days. So to the maximum extent possible, I'd appreciate any specific responses or feedback on each of these, and hopefully I can see without my glasses. And actually, a couple of these are processed. So, Madam Chair, I think you might have already preempted one of these questions. I'd like to just make sure we walk out tonight with a clear near-term plan for how we're going to finalize the document as Board of Supervisors in terms of how final edits will be.
Yeah, I'd like to work through our plan before we adjourn for the evening.
And then to the extent that we reach a conclusion prior to the 150 days to adopt some amended form of the draft in front of us or the draft we have in front of us in its current form, I also would like, and we don't have to do it tonight, but certainly before the end of our year, just nail down a midterm timeline for revisiting the comp plan so we don't end up in a situation where 2 years from now we're talking about how we promised to look at it every 6 months. So if we end up adopting it with modified maps or no maps or current maps, I'd like to make sure we have a clear idea when we're going to come back to that part of the draft and anything else in there that we think will require an update. So that would be next year or the year after. I mentioned to Mr. Connick at the last meeting, not really a concern, but just an observation of the document in its whole form to me seems to bury the lead. I don't want to repeat in detail what I said, but a question I have for the entire Planning Commission is to what extent did you consider reordering the document so that all the land use principles, goals, et cetera, are up front? I think it would be a good statement and a somewhat defensive and protective statement to state our goals up front in the document rather than burying them at the back. Another concern I have is that for the average reader, it's a very dense document with a lot of demographic and other details, and I wonder to what extent we could do some summary form of each chapter with everything moved to appendices. I'm not suggesting doing that now, but I'd like to hear from everyone if that was contemplated, and if it hasn't been, why not, and then if that would be a priority going forward, if we do every 6-month review or every year. The town of Washington, I think that's the mayor back there. He walked in, I appreciate you being here. I would like to hear if there was any consideration of the town of Washington's own comprehensive plan and to what extent this document does or does not reflect the town of Washington's interests. There are a number of key parcels near the town of Washington that are currently under study for various projects. There's another commercial project that was in the Rappahannock news recently, an old mill property. Two of those properties are, one of those properties is completely in the county, one is partially in the county, and one is completely in the town. So to the extent that the town of Washington government has been talking actively about seeking boundary line adjustments with the county, I do want to make sure that we aren't forgetting about that and that we aren't taking into full account the town of Washington's interests and our interests in protecting county interests vis-a-vis the town. I do want to just raise a question. There's the commercial area that is above the co-op, an area of great interest for many of my constituents, and some commercial activity up there on Clark Lane that's been problematic over the years. And I noticed that the commercial area line has been adjusted to move that area up and behind the co-op out of the commercial zone. I just want to understand what the implications are for commercial activities already going in that area, going on in that area, if that line is adjusted and brought closer to 211. I realize I'm not quoting Benjamin Franklin. This is not as interesting, but practical questions. Sperryville, I did sit on the sewer authority. I do have concerns about the age and condition of the system, not so much the plant, but the collection system out in the village. I understand the sewer authority is doing a study to give everyone a better, more solid data-based sense of the condition of the plant and the system as a whole. And I just wonder if there are any updates on that front, because if we are focusing attention inside a circle in Sperryville, and that is hinged to a fully functioning but 35-year-old sewer system, I just want to make sure we're smart and we're not overstepping in that regard. Today we took initial action to form a broadband authority. I also want to make sure that that section, I think page 98 if I'm not mistaken, talking about wireless communication, that we are not going to have forces collide where we're trying to move forward with some broadband initiative and then the comp plan in some way might preclude us from doing what we want to do. And then finally, I would like to hear from Mr. Curry. He worked with the Regional Commission to come up with alternative maps, and we have not had an opportunity to hear from him. So I would like just to hear from him his view on the maps currently in the comp plan and those that he's brought for our further review. And I think that's all I have. So I don't know if...
Thank you, Mr. Woodson. Well, you addressed a question to Mr. Curry, so I'd like to give him an opportunity to answer it if he's ready to answer it at this time.
I heard a lot tonight about how the maps put forward by the Planning Commission were based on the zoning maps. Well, that's not evident to the reader or viewer of the maps. So if it is the mind of the Planning Commission and the board to incorporate maps that are based on the zoning, then why not show the zoning on those maps? And if you want the line to be where it's shown as proposed by the Planning Commission, then show the line where it is, but show the underlying zone. My largest concern with those maps is the companion narrative. And that narrative puts no bounds on any proposed zoning. It makes no suggestion as to whether zoning changes are supported once you're within that bound, or within that belt. So somebody could come forward and suggest that the comp plan supports changing an RR5 parcel to general commercial because it's in the belt. There's no clarity within the plan to suggest that that's not what you want. And I'm quite sure that's not what you want. So if you keep the maps, I would suggest you work on the narrative.
If I could, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Frazier.
There's, and I appreciate all the work Mr. Curry did on those maps, and there are some parts of those maps that he presented to the board that I like. I think there can be a blending in some areas of the two, or perhaps a later adoption of one versus the other. But I don't know about the advertising requirements for a new set of maps. That's why I'm kind of hesitant. I don't like the Anisville map that the planning commission recommended approval of. I don't like the Sperryville map right now of the one that the planning commission recommended approval of. I do like the one for the commercial zone that Mr. Whitson brought up. When you have a zoning ordinance and a comprehensive plan that speaks specifically to protecting the steep inclines in the county, and we've got a commercial line that goes up there for no good apparent reason, the planning commission was unanimous on that map. There's no justification to have commercial zoning up there, in our opinion. That's why we recommended to move that line back to at least a more reasonable looking delineation. So there may be some method to our madness in the map drawing. But I do think that the maps that Mr. Curry, have produced have quite a bit of merit. And I do agree with the argument that, some of the residential areas that were kept out of certain maps should have been in there. I think if you go back and look, we had a couple of split votes on those. I'm pretty sure we were unanimous on the commercial.
When I'm looking at the commercial area map, and I remember there being quite a bit of discussion on that, and I know one of the things that it was brought up several times was actually how this map would be labeled, and I still see it labeled commercial area. Was there any discussion about relabeling it to reflect more accurately what it is, which is the general commercial overlay district?
We probably got lazy in our discussion habits.
Well, I know that came up in my time on the commission, that it sort of misconstrues what it is to think that it is a commercial area when it actually is a general commercial overlay district. So I do wonder if that's worth going back to clean up.
It is my suggestion that the board very seriously consider separating the ordinance from the comprehensive plan in this way. The ordinance right now references the map that's in the comp plan as a part of the zoning structure. And that's cumbersome, and one would suggest that if you change the map of the comp plan today, or whenever you vote on this, that you're changing the ordinance, but that is not a proper advertisement because it affects fewer than 25 parcels. You would have to send notice to each and every one of those parcel owners for that upzoning or downzoning, and that's not been done. And the cleanest way to do that is to change your ordinance and incorporate a map specifically for the overlay district as part of your zoning maps. Then this portion of your comp plan can speak to your future dreams of what a commercial area could or should be and support future rezonings perhaps. But having them tied together is rather dangerous.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. Any further discussion from the board members?
I believe he's correct in that, but if the commercial overlay zone, I believe that map should be used as a comp plan map for future and for the current zoning. We may have a little bit more work to do on the maps. I believe we can touch it in the ordinance.
I guess I wonder where we are. Mr. Whitson brought up quite a few points. I should mention I actually did get some language specifically regarding the artist that Barbara Black had volunteered to write and brought to me. I don't think it will be anything controversial. It's just a little bit of additional language that I will clean up and bring to the board and propose a way to integrate it into the existing language as it stands. did want to acknowledge Mr. Catlin's here from the town of Washington. And I don't think you were here when we had public comment, but you're welcome to speak if you have something you'd like to say.
I would, if I could.
Absolutely.
You want me to go to the microphone?
Please do. Uh-oh.
Turned it off. I'm Fred Catlin, the mayor of the town of Washington. Can you hear me all right with the mask?
You might lift up the, I don't know, can you lift up the microphone closer or something? Here? There you go.
It doesn't seem to be working very well.
Test.
I think that works.
Can you hear me? The town council has not been able to take up the issue of the county's comprehensive plan yet. But I would like to make just a couple of comments. Having been involved in the town's comprehensive plan several years ago, the first thing I want to say is that I recognize all of the effort that the Planning Commission put into this, and it's a worthy document that they put together. The second thing that I would want to share with my colleagues is, and this is a direct reference to something that Mr. Whitson said, and I don't want it to be misconstrued. I think Mr. Whitson was saying rightfully that the town has indicated that they're open to applications for boundary line adjustments. Once we have those applications, we'd like to go through the process of talking with the county. But the main gist of the town's comprehensive plan is to follow in step with the county's comprehensive plan, both the past one and what I perceive as being the current one, which is to funnel growth such as it comes to the villages, the town of Washington being one of those stated villages. We have no desire to become some grand metropolitan location, but we do recognize that we have a very well-functioning sewer or wastewater system that's at 50% capacity, that has the ability to take on more. As a citizen of the town, but more importantly to this discussion, as a citizen of the county, I care very much for the rural character that this county has. It's one of the attractions for moving here. And so to be able to help the county by having some of that growth be funneled into the town of Washington is something that's important to us. And again, as members of the community, the county, and those who are interested in seeing the county stay as beautiful as it is. So I wanted to bring that point up. We have a difficulty in the town that we do not have very much opportunity for infill. The decline in population in the town has occurred because the household population, the per capita per house, went from 7 or 8 50 years ago down to less than 2. And that means that we have still a lot of our houses that are occupied. We have a lot of land that may be double lots, and the residents have no desire in breaking off that second lot and creating an additional house on it. So any of the growth that's going to happen is going to probably happen on the fringes of the town and on adjacent property in the county. And again, we are very sensitive that anything that we would do, we would want to do in alliance and cooperation with the county. And I thank you again for this opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you, Mayor Catlin.
Thanks, Red. Thanks for coming.
Do any members of the Commission or the Board of Supervisors have any additional comments that they'd like to make?
If I may, I'd just like to say that what Mr. Whitson said about a third-party study for Sterryville would make me feel much more comfortable with what we are trying to accomplish in the Sperryville area. If we're going to put the spotlight on the septic, basically, I'd like someone that works in the business to come and actually speak to us and let us know what the current situation is and what the expectation is for long term.
Thinking back to our last meeting, I think I volunteered to sit on the Water and Sewer Authority board meetings and monitor the progress on that and bring that back to my board.
Excellent.
And that's my intention. I should tell you, I mean, that's sort of been talked about since a meeting I went to 3 years ago, so I don't know that we should wait our decisions or hold our decisions until that work is done. I think we have decisions to make by the end of December.
Could I get a word in edgewise?
Yes, Mr. Connick. Yes, please speak, Mr. Connick.
Thank you. I apologize. The sound quality, except for Mr. Curry, is not the greatest, so I can't really tell exactly what you're saying. But anyway, sometimes some of you are worse, better than others. But in any event, as to Sperryville, I would suggest that, I think that study is a great idea. And I just want to remind the board that from the first comprehensive plan, which in the 1980s, until now, or until January, the section on the Sperryville Water and Sewer Authority and system, there was one paragraph in the comp plan. It was exactly the same. I went back and checked every edition or every version of the comp plan. It never changed. It said, Sperryville has a sewer system that was built in 80-something. It's a certain size and it has a capacity of a certain amount, and no changes and no alterations that are going to cost any money or anything else are anticipated in the next 5 years, which is the cycle of the comp plan. It said the same exact thing every single time. This year is the first time that anybody from the Planning Commission, to my knowledge, invited the chairman of the Water and Sewer Authority to come and speak and say, how it really impacts, how that system impacts or could impact the comp plan and what should be in it. So I appreciate that the information we have is not perfect. It never is. And just like we did for affordable housing, we tied what's in the plan to if there's going to be a study by PD9 when the study comes out or when the census is finished, then we're going to revisit that topic. And so if the Sperryville plan comes up, their study is finished and it shows different information that somehow impacts what we've done, well, obviously we'd have to change the plan just like anything else. It's an iterative process. And if you keep on saying, well, this isn't perfect, so let's cut that out. And that part's not perfect either, so let's cut that part out. And this, we're not sure of this data, so let's just leave that out. Pretty soon, you're not going to have anything left, except a completely vapid document, which is what we've got now. It's got nothing. It's got no maps. It's got no future plan. It has nothing. And all I'm hearing is a lot of nitpicking from, I appreciate your intention, but I would like to know, where was the mayor of the town of Washington, which that section hasn't changed in all these years either. It hasn't, we didn't change anything in there. What's in there is exactly the same stuff. Where were all these people for the last 15 years telling us about all these things that we needed to take into consideration? And now, we've had our public hearing, PF, none of them showed up for that either. Now you all have had your public hearing, and now 2 meetings after your public hearing, suddenly we're hearing this and that, and if we keep on going down that road, we're never going to get it passed. So I'm not denigrating what anybody said. I appreciate all their comments, but that's part of the process. There's a lot of things that have really been improved in this plan, and it needs to get adopted now. And these other things in the next cycle, if you want to review it every year or 2 years, fine. If there's new data, fine. Let's bring it up and let's amend it. But right now, we can't afford to wait, in my opinion. So that's the answer to an awful lot of these comments. I'm not saying they're not valid. I'm just saying there are things that we need to take into consideration as we go forward. But, right now, it looks to me like we're dead in the water. And it's just an invitation, and that's what the process has been since our public hearing, is more and more people are coming up with more and more reasons to continue to do nothing. And that's a horrible mistake.
Thank you, Mr. Connick. I did want to check, too, about, I know, Mr. Whitson, you had a list of concerns. And I want to make sure that, that we have actionable items coming out of the meeting tonight. We've heard from the town of Washington. We've talked about the Water and Sewer Authority. Could you refresh my memory about
and just to respond to Mr. Connick also, Madam Chair, I'm not trying to be obstructionist. I mean, the document's been handed to us. I'm representing one district in the county. I think it's my job to read it and ask questions, so that's all I'm doing. I think it's a good document. I think we're close, but like, it's not unreasonable to ask questions. I would hope that people would expect us to ask questions. So, Madam Chair, you're gonna talk again about sort of.
I just wanted to make sure. As I said, I volunteered to sit in on the Water and Sewer Authority meeting and see what kind of progress that they're making, and if there's something that can be added to this plan. I think a footnote acknowledgement of the work that they're doing, and that the plan will be updated with the results of that study is very appropriate and something we can easily do. I just wanted to make sure we had the list of the other actionable items. I know one of them was sort of reformatting the comp plan and putting the sort of more declarative statements on the front end rather than the description on the front of the document.
That might be for later. I just wanted to raise it since the whole commission is here.
Okay, because I wanted to clear the air on what are the things we really need to take with us on this journey this evening, and what are the things we need to put away for our next trip?
I think the things you need to take on the journey tonight is what do you want to do? I mean, we were directed very importantly a year ago to get done with the comp plan, and move on with the May amendments and doing changes to the ordinances. And we attacked that pretty aggressively during 2020. And we've got to this point and listening to, comments about what ideas to do changes to the comp plan, basically take what's at the end, put up front, and take out the maps, study the maps, and do all these things. Well, it's going to be a year before we're back here to approve this thing again. We're going to have a new chairman next year on the Planning Commission. Connick is going to be gone. He's provided leadership. He's going to be gone, and we're going to fall back into disarray somewhat with a lot of discussion back and forth. It's going to be deadlocked on different opinions and what to do. So we're going to be a year out before we're here again. So we can get something passed. Like I said, it may not be perfect. I don't think any comprehensive plan is perfect. In terms of Washington, Washington is kind of like Luxembourg. It's a country unto itself here within the county, I think. It is a very nice place. It's got its own historical attributes and historical zoning and things like this that is different from what we have in the balance of Rappahannock County. Now, if we're talking about boundary adjustments, that's a political thing. I don't think necessarily the comp plan puts a stamp of approval or is required for a stamp of approval on boundary adjustments for municipalities. So if they want to incorporate some properties within the county into the town, that's between the Board of Supervisors and the Town Council of Washington. We can be done under the disguise of promoting tourism or economic development or whatever within the comp plan for the comp plan approval. But, you know, we didn't have any input about the mill a year ago or anything else. And I don't, you know, I haven't heard of any affordable housing plans, you know, for the people of for the people of Washington that's going to be promoted or anything like this. And I don't know necessarily if their plans match with ours, but you know, they have a wonderful thing going on with the town. And I think some of the problems that they're experiencing in the town is that so much of the town relies upon one business in that town. And that one business has accumulated so many properties that, so at some point in the future, I think they're starting to recognize that there may become a day of reckoning when there's a change of ownership or whatever, or the business climate changes, and they're going to have financial problems. So they have a lot on their table to consider and plan for the future. And I guess we may be part of that at some time in the future. But I think the board has a decision whether or not we're going to come back a year from now and play with this deck of cards and try to have something else. You know, I think it was a very common sense approach that we've worked on, and we forged this over the last 12 months, and we forged ahead with the May amendments that we're trying to get passed. So we're trying to get all these things wrapped up, and now we're back to this utopia that we're trying to put together. And, you know, hey, we can start over, and we'll be back here next Christmas. So that's my opinion where we are right now.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. I appreciate you and all your hard work on this document. And for what it's worth, I agree with you.
Madam Chair, if I could, I hate to
Mr.
take any
Frazier.
more time than anybody else is getting, but I think to address Mr. Whitson's questions, and they were all good questions. I wrote down a list of them. I didn't write down the best ones. I don't know. But anyway, I think the timeline, I think that, you know, we really do have to have some sort of an idea how we're going to approach incremental, you know, reviews. And I think, you know, at least 6 months would be a good start, at least to be an attempt. As far as the appendices and bulk data and those things around how the format of the document is compiled, I think we really ought to probably talk about that, doing that later. But I think we addressed the commercial line behind the co-op. Then I think Ms. Donahue addressed the condition of the Stereo Authority and yourself. And I think the only thing that's really maybe a concern, and I don't think it's an immediate concern, is I'm not trying to downplay it, is the potential of a boundary adjustment of the town. Normally, a boundary adjustment between the town and the county, or even a city and a county, it has to benefit both parties. So as Mr. Henry pointed out, it's really a political discussion that hasn't started because we don't have anything to work with. So that really could be 6 months or a year from now. And I really think the only thing that we have that's a potential hang-up tonight is that not everybody's happy with the maps, including me. I don't think Mr. Henry's 100% on the maps either. I bet each planning commissioner has probably some sort of problem with one map. And I think that we can start working on the maps to try and touch them up, blend them together, whatever needs to be done. Whoever the planning commission is made up of, starting, you know, in December or January. But I really think we need to move on. And without trying to be premature, I'd like to put in form of a motion that we adopt the comprehensive plan tonight that we have in front of us.
I don't think that we have the resolution drawn up at this time to adopt the comp plan tonight. But I do think, I agree with the sentiment that we need to adopt it. But the resolution hasn't been drawn up. Mr. Curry, please correct me.
Well, we don't. I've heard a number of items
between the last meeting and this meeting and the errata sheet, and is the board of the mind to include those items into the documents?
Well, and I guess this is at the point where I should speak about what I think we ought to do.
The errata is important.
I think we ought to clean up the errata tonight. I think we ought to pass it, get it done, get it incorporated. We ought to plan a meeting in the middle of this month. Ms. Donahue, check into the wireless language that you're concerned with. Mr. Parrish, work into and find a place for the country store language that you're concerned with. I'll work on the arts language and the water and sewer authority, just some simple statements to get that portion cleaned up because those are concerns that were brought to me. And Mr. Whitson, I was trying to figure out if there were cleanup items on your list that weren't addressed.
I mean, I've gone through the whole document, so I've edits. That was why I was asking about the near-term timeline, and just typographic edits.
So I think that if we leave tonight and each of us has an assignment to address our concerns, we come together. I think we should meet not next Monday, but the following Monday, as we have been for our work sessions. Call it for 6. Talk about these maps, bring forward the language that we've put together, and work through it together. And just keep it simple. Because I do think things could easily spiral out of hand if we start taking a little off this and a little off that. So I'd like to have a mid-month work session this month. For December, our meeting is as late as it can be for the Board of Supervisors. Our regular meeting is December 7th. And then I think if need be, if we can't adopt it on the 7th, then we have a special meeting on the 14th. And we adopt it at that time. And if we can't get it passed on the 14th, we've got to figure out another day before the 29th. But I really think with a work session to work through the points that are important to each of us, simply and with common sense, have a little more discussion on the maps, we can get things in line for December and get it adopted by mid-December. And I hope that that's an agreeable plan to everybody.
Are we going to run into any advertising difficulties?
I don't believe so, Mr. Curry.
Your advertising is complete, your public hearing is complete, you could adopt it any time.
With the changes that we may make?
No, the Code of Virginia is very clear that both the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors are entitled to adopt, amend and adopt, or reject.
So, Madam Chair, let's agree that on this work session that we will not leave in that session until we have an agreement on the maps.
Right.
And at the same time, charge Mr. Curry with streamlining the language around the maps so that, you know, they mesh, that they make sense to each other.
Well, I would need to know what the board wants.
Right. Well, once we get the maps in, and that'll give you another 2 weeks to get it for the December meeting, and then we can go ahead and pass it at that point.
I think that's the cleanest and clearest way forward, where we all can discuss it, work through what's important to us, and kind of keep the document intact, keep the integrity in place. I don't think we should be making broad changes at this point. The commission has done their work and sent us a good document, and we ought to just do as little harm as possible and get it passed. If that's agreeable to everyone.
That sounds like a plan.
Okay. Mr. Whitson?
Yeah, that's fine. I guess my only question is, what's our deadline for submitting our final minor edits?
I think if you have minor edits, it should be in a week before the actual work session.
And how should we transmit those? Just directly to Mr. Curry? Or?
Yes, those should go to Mr. Curry.
So what's our contemplated work session date?
I believe it would
Pull up the calendar.
11/16.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. That is correct.
I would suggest we start maybe at 6 if we can instead of 7.
Yeah, that worked, I thought, very well last time to start early. That way we're all fresh. We can get into it and get done pretty quickly. So that would be a work session on the 16th. And then if we need one, we can have another meeting to follow up on December 14th. I would like the resolution, please go ahead and be drawn up, Mr. Curry, so that when we are ready, we can adopt the comp plan. Do you need a motion or any other further action in that regard?
No.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion from any of the members of the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors?
Madam Chair, I very much appreciate that we've been invited here tonight to share our extra thoughts on this. I, for my part, really appreciate the extra time and consideration, as I said, that the board is giving to this document. I do feel I would be remiss if I did not highlight a few things that have come up since this was passed. I am aware, and I know you are also, that residents of Sperryville have signed a petition with almost 100 signatures expressing concerns about inclusion of these maps in the comprehensive plan and asking that they be pulled out and looked at more closely. I also want to clear up a couple of misperceptions, I think, that first of all, the Virginia Code does not actually require that we have future land use maps. It requires that we do future land use planning, but these maps are optional. They're not a requirement. Nor does Virginia law require that we incentivize development. We do not have to encourage growth. We only have to plan to accommodate growth that we expect to occur. So I would agree with everything that's been said so far about the intent and motivation behind the inclusion of these maps, which is to protect our county and to protect the outside areas from sprawl. I just expressed concerns that the language, the actual narrative that's in the maps, doesn't in any way indicate that there will be protection of the lands outside of these areas. It just indicates that implies that there would be encouraging new growth and potentially, therefore, new rezonings within these boundaries. And since we have under our current zoning immense amounts of land that can be developed by right, I think we should be very sensitive to the fact of feeling that we need to encourage new extra growth inside these areas. I think our focus should be on looking at how to manage the growth that can occur by right and how to direct that in a way that meets services and other needs of our county residents. So I think that language and the maps themselves, again, may not do exactly what we're hoping that they will do, but they can, in fact, do a lot of damage by encouraging and incentivizing extra growth that I don't think any of us want. So I think that's what maybe the residents of Sperryville may have been addressing, although I have not obviously talked to them all, but I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. I guess from my mind,
Madam Chairman, I would like to say something about that.
Well,
and that is that,
Mr. Koenig, may I say something first, please?
What?
May I say something first, please?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
I would like to just say, I think, and I appreciate that people are so interested in this process and engaged, and a lot of the people that signed that document actually came to the meeting, the last meeting we had where Mr. Koenig spoke. And again, this is the education piece, because some of the things, through no fault of their own, it's very cryptic idea, comp plan, zoning. Some of the language in that petition, you read it and you think, yes, of course I'm going to sign this. It sounds like a wonderful document. But it doesn't really mean what you think it means. And it really doesn't oppose the comp plan. So I think that document was very well intentioned, but again, I think the key to getting people on board with the comp plan is education about what really is in there that makes it work. And there may need to be some language added regarding the villages, and I will look through that as well for our next session.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So again, I just would say that I really think education is key, and I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. Mr. Koenig, what did you have to add, please?
Right. I just wanted to say again that, as I said at the last meeting, and with all due respect to Ms. Fishy, I appreciate her concerns, and I appreciate the concerns of the people in Spurrierville, but the parts of Spurrierville that are zoned village residential and village commercial and highway commercial and RR5 that are included in the village of Spurrierville proposed map are not going to change. And so if someone wants to develop any of those areas that are so designated and so zoned at present, they can do it. And the comp plan is not going to change any of their development rights or vested rights that they have under their current zoning. The only thing having the map is going to do is clarify, and I think the language that Mr. Light drafted that goes along with the map says that the current zoning designations of the areas in the villages is adequate to deal with any, doesn't need to be any additional rezoning of any property to accommodate any anticipated growth. And so in other words, those existing zoning categories are going to stay that way. Now I appreciate what Mr. Curry says, and if you on the board want to do something to clarify or tighten up that language to make that even more clear, please feel free to do so if you think we did an imperfect job of doing it. But the intent of it is to limit growth and not to promote it and not to allow it to spread. That's the whole point of having the map. And as you alluded to and as I alluded to, the current comprehensive plan leaves the county walking around with its pants down around its ankles. And if we don't have a belt around the villages, that's going to continue to be the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Connick. Is there any further discussion on any concerns regarding the plan? And Ms. Fishy, if you'd like to make those additional language concerns in writing, I'd be happy to bring that forward at the next meeting as well.
Thank you. I'd be happy to do that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can we confirm that Mr. Frazier's motion died for lack of a second?
Is there a second for Mr. Frazier's motion?
I'll withdraw because I'm just kind of frustrated with, we just keep on adding things to this soup, and after a while it won't be edible.
Well, I think we should have maybe I'd just like to express a vote of confidence that I think we received a wonderful document and we can get this done well in advance of the required deadline. I don't know that I need to make a motion, but I did want to say that.
As much as I appreciate it, if we could just put our efforts into the next meeting.
Well, and then I guess I need to make a motion that we adopt the errata this evening if there's any second or conversation regarding that. So I made a motion to adopt the errata as presented in the packet this evening for my board.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Is there any discussion or question regarding adopting the errata document as it's presented this evening?
Where is this document?
It should have been on the agenda.
It is attached to the board docs, the planning commission resolution conveying the rata sheet.
Oh, great.
Comp plan.
And what this document is, please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Frazier, when you all had your comp plan hearing, public hearing, there were some things that came forward in the course of that meeting that were sort of cleanup items that you referred to our board to make these changes.
Yes, things at our very next work session.
So I do think it is important to go ahead and get these details passed this evening.
I think I did it once, but I'll take the blame again for that. We were stuck, and I just made the motion to approve what we had in front of us, and we went through a majority. But I don't think that we were getting anywhere that way.
All right. So we have a motion and a second of adopting the errata. Is there any questions or concerns?
What's the, Madam Chair, what's the reason for adopting this tonight if we're gonna have a work session shortly? I mean, is there an administrative purpose behind adopting this now?
Well, I just think it would be wise to get this behind us.
If you adopt it tonight, I will incorporate it into the document and you will see it within.
Okay, all right, that's fine. That's my question.
So I do think there is a good reason to go ahead and get it done. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, that takes us back to our agenda. The errata has been passed. We've got our work plan in place, and I thank everyone very much for their participation in this discussion this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for letting the Planning Commission participate.
Well, I really feel like the joint meetings between different bodies or advisors, sources of information, everything we can do to improve our processes is greatly appreciated. That takes us to the next item on the agenda, the FEMA notification received regarding updated FIS and FIRM. Mr. Curry, would you be so kind as to tee this up for us, please?
Yes. As the planning commissioners and board members are certainly aware, our floodplain ordinance is a portion of the zoning ordinance included in section 45, and it's an overlay district within zoning. FEMA has updated our floodplain maps, and they will become effective February 26, 2021. And as a board and planning commission, you must adopt an updated ordinance referencing these new maps and aligning with the latest required language if we want to stay within the National Flood Insurance Program, which I'm sure we do. The state has a model ordinance, and it appears the ordinance that was adopted in 2015 followed that model ordinance because it's exactly the same except for a few changes that have been made to the model ordinance since then. I've compared the two and attached an ordinance markup to board docs showing what needs to change, including most fundamentally referencing the new maps. And I've also prepared some documents relative to scheduling. The board and the planning commission must hold public hearings on the revised ordinance, just like any other ordinance. And that must be done to convey the document to DCR by the end of January, and I think probably the board's first meeting in February could probably work. I do need direction from the board on how you want to proceed with this. If you want to try to schedule joint meetings with the Planning Commission to accomplish this, or if you want to do it in sequence, the schedule that is attached that you can review has a few options based on when the ordinance would have to be noticed in the paper for the public hearings, or each body that could have a public hearing at the Planning Commission on the 16th of December or on the 20th of January. But we need to move this forward quickly without any delay.
Mr. Curry, can we do the amendment that you proposed for the commercial overlay district at the same time? Or does it have to be a separate thing?
I would keep this separate. I would include the very simple language change for that with the May amendments, quite frankly, for the commercial area.
Okay, just thought I'd ask.
Personally, I don't know how everybody else feels about meetings in winter, but they make me very nervous. I'd recommend we move forward with the soonest adoption guideline, and that way, if we should encounter any schedule issues due to bad weather, we would have time to get another plan in place.
There really aren't any controversial changes to this ordinance. We must adopt the new maps or pull out of NFIP, which means citizens in our county who are in floodplain areas and have flood insurance will no longer be able to get flood insurance. I don't think we want to do that. It is perfunctory in many ways. The ordinance is in with the state now, having their review, which is a required step. So I assume I'll have that information back shortly, and then I can coordinate with the Planning Commission to plan for a December 16th public hearing, which means the ad will have to go out the first week of December.
I'd like to hear how other board members.
Well, you better tell Mr. Goff to start looking at it so that he can have plenty of time to review the advertisement and make sure that it's, okay.
Yeah, that's why we're here tonight, planning ahead.
Good.
Does anyone have any other concerns or a way that they prefer to bring this forward? All right, well, I'd like us to go with the soonest adoption so we can get this done, please. The last item on the agenda for the Joint Commission and Board of Supervisors meeting is the status of Board of Supervisors referrals to the Planning Commission. Mr. Chairman, would you care to give us an update on this?
Can you hear? I couldn't hear you.
Would you care to give the update on the?
Right. Well, the various things, as I recollect, have all been sort of included in the package that's part of the May amendments. The business on food processing and canneries and all that, we already discussed at a work session, I don't know, a month and a half ago. And so that's in there. It's basically going to provide for, we had a very interesting presentation from Canada Love, thanks to Mr. Henry, who lined that up for us and talked about agriculture and various processing and things that we could do in the county. Anyways, after quite a bit of discussion and debate, we're just going to add it to the list of permitted uses. And so that is part now of what's come to be called the May amendments. The adaptive use provisions also that were debated, I don't know, 2 years ago, and I think the Planning Commission came to a consensus, but they never had a public hearing on it and never sent it back to the board. That's also in the package. And unfortunately, Mr. Goff, that's what I was referring to just a minute ago, didn't have enough time to review our advertisement and after our work session last Wednesday. So hopefully the May amendments are going to come up for a public hearing at our December meeting. There's some tweaks that Mr. Curry, I think, wants to do. So anyway, we're moving forward with all those things, and they're all in the May amendment package.
There are several matters that have been referred to the Planning Commission: the sign ordinance, solar farms, golf driving ranges, professional offices, public art, family subdivision considerations, temporary structure considerations, events by nonprofit entities, and the family apartments, which is in the document. So there are several other items that are keyed up.
The family apartments, we, after again several work sessions, we're basically going to combine family apartments with efficiency apartments and just have one designation because with the family apartments, basically there's no real way to enforce the restrictions that limit it to a family. So we're just going to have one category, efficiency apartments. It's going to have the same provisions that the family apartment had, namely a maximum of 1,200 square feet, and it's got to be within 200 feet of the principal residence and or within it, and so forth. So we've done that. These other things, the sign ordinance and some of these other things that Mr. Curry just mentioned, we have on our work plan, but we we just haven't had adequate time. We've been, meeting 2 and 3 times a month and working full tilt on the comp plan and on the May amendments, which have been on the list for a lot longer than most of the things that were just rattled off. So the sign ordinances was the next thing to come down the pike. And, hopefully we're going to get to, I guess, some discussion of that in December. I don't know. We'll see how things pan out. But we're working on those things, but we're also abiding by the direction we got from the Board of Supervisors, which was defer all those other things until we finish the comp plan, which we just finished. And the next thing on the list was the May amendment. So we've just finished those last Wednesday. And so we're moving down we did some of the easy ones like the canneries or food processing. And so the other things on the list are still on the list of things to do.
Thank you. The intent of having this on the agenda was the two bodies together. There may be a discussion of the order of priority of the items that aren't done yet. The board has a particular priority order that's different than may have been conveyed in the past. This is a great opportunity to discuss that together and set a clear direction to the Planning Commission so they know what to work on in what order.
Well, that's fine with me. I was sending monthly reports, and the last one that I sent had an amended work plan for the end of the year. As you all are well aware, we kind of lost 2 or 3 months because of the pandemic or whatever, state of emergency. So we weren't able to meet, and we lost a lot of time, and that set us back. So if the supervisors have some issues or some want to talk about what's in the work plan, which I guess we're a little behind on that, that's fine. We're glad to get some input from you.
I'd like to hear from the other supervisors if they have any priority items. Mr. Frazier.
I think the next thing that we should be working on is the sign ordinance public art.
Thank you, Mrs. Dante.
I would agree with Mr. Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Parrish.
Same here.
And Mr. Whitson?
I agree. Family subdivision was one that was of interest to me as well. But
What? I couldn't hear what Mr. Whitson.
Family subdivision was another one that was of interest to me, but I agree with the others.
Right.
Sign ordinance is probably the top priority.
Yeah, I think the sign ordinance, family subdivision, and temporary structures, those are all very important to me, but probably the sign.
What? I couldn't hear
The
that.
temporary structures language, so I would say probably the sign ordinance and the public art fall into the same category. And then after
Right.
that,
Well, the sign ordinance and the public art is the next thing on the work plan after completion of the May amendments.
very good.
But as things are looking now, that's going to be December. So I guess it'll be left to whoever comes next.
Thank you, Mr. Connick, and I do appreciate all the hard work you've put in as chairman, as well as the rest of the commission. And certainly I share your frustration of not being able to accomplish our original scope of work this year at my board as well, due to the pandemic and some of the meetings that we've lost.
Well, that's the one thing I guess I would say I have learned in my experiences as a member of the Planning Commission, that things take longer than you think they would. Which is something Mr. Light always said. He was correct.
All right, the next item on the agenda, if there's no further discussion,
Does
is...
the board want to further prioritize this long list in front of the Planning Commission to get a comprehensive priority?
Well, I guess if we're going to have a newly seated planning commission in January, we should have another joint meeting. I think the sign ordinance and family subdivision is pretty ambitious work.
Well, Madam Chairman, I just want to say, you know, that the board has already considered a whole series of piecemeal amendments to the zoning ordinance, and now you're adding in these family things to the subdivision ordinance. And after doing it, I mean, one of the changes was to remove the authority of the Board of Zoning Appeals to issue special use permits. And that occupied a huge amount of time. The Planning Commission, after several months of discussing it and so forth, voted, I think unanimously, to recommend to the supervisors that they not make a piecemeal change like that. And then there's been various other things that I mean, I just think it's a mistake because things do take longer, and the family subdivision issue, yeah, that's an issue, but there's much more important issues that have to do with the subdivision ordinance, like all the exceptions to what is a subdivision, the definition of a subdivision, the right of the, or the obligation or whatever of the Planning Commission to review proposed subdivisions are all critically important subjects that are, in my opinion, way more important than family subdivisions, which in my opinion are constitutionally questionable. But, you know, for the board to do that is going to require that the commission devote time to one little minor issue and not ever get around to the major issues, which the subdivision ordinance hasn't really been reviewed in a comprehensive way since something like 88. And it's way overdue. And the evidence, as I have said many times, of that is the fact that not a single subdivision has come before the Planning Commission in probably 10 or 15 years. So something, and look, and I don't think anybody at this meeting would say, well, there aren't any subdivisions happening in Rappahannock County. People are subdividing lots and tracts of land all over the place. So it needs attention, and to direct the Planning Commission to spend what little time it's got on the family subdivision, which is the least of our problems, is a big mistake. And to constantly cherry pick these issues, and you know, the sign ordinance, yeah, that's an important thing, but there's a lot of more important things. And I just want to bring to the board's attention, you're going to see it in about a month. There's an application pending for a country inn that has engendered great interest and opposition in the Wakefield district. And I only bring it up because it calls attention to the fact that there are so many uses and so many things in the current zoning ordinance that haven't been really reviewed in a comprehensive way since 1986 that are real problem areas. And to cherry pick this one or that one and say, well, just do this and just do that, it winds up taking 2 or 3 months to work your way through one particular issue like that. And all the while, you can't spend, or the Planning Commission can't spend its time doing that. And so my suggestion, and it's just a suggestion, is the Board of Supervisors really ought to rethink this pattern of, you know, micromanaging the Planning Commission. If you have a Planning Commission that's doing what its job is, and when the comprehensive plan gets passed, and the comprehensive review first of the zoning ordinance happens, and then a comprehensive review of the subdivision ordinance happens, and that's what it's called for in the comp plan, these things will all be discussed and hashed out, and be on the list of things that will be corrected and updated. But to pick this one or that one out, I think is very counterproductive.
So is there any problem with allowing the planning commission to approach these things, and give them the option to work on the ones that they consider to be the most important first?
Well, I think, I mean, I'm not opposed to them. I mean, I think that's the point of having a discussion between our board and their commission, is that if something that we're asking for isn't working for them, I'd like to know it. And if the answer is, well, you know, it's sort of not taking a holistic approach to the problem, and we probably need to look at the whole subdivision ordinance, I think that's an eminently sensible thing to do. Because we heard about a problem as the supervisors, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other issues that need to be addressed in the ordinance. And if it hasn't been revisited since the late 80s, I mean, it probably needs to be done. So,
well, you know, Madam Chairman, I think the Planning Commission and the board ought to have more regular joint meetings just like this, so that these kind of issues can be talked about and the priorities can be, or at least the board can be better apprised of what the issues are and what the Planning Commission is doing. You know, when I took over as chairman, I started to write monthly reports. And I guess I stopped doing it a month or so ago after we finished the comprehensive plan. And you know, in all those months, I never got one single comment, no feedback from any supervisor about what we're doing. And to my knowledge, that's the first time that's ever been done, that the chairman of the Planning Commission made a regular monthly report of activities of the Planning Commission. Nobody ever said anything, and then all of a sudden I started hearing about, oh, the Board of Supervisors brought up this issue or that issue and referred it to the Commission without any regard for what the work plan said and what we had on our platter of things to do. So I think there ought to be better coordination between the two bodies, just as a matter of efficiency, so that the board is apprised of what the Planning Commission is doing and not give it some instructions that result in it stopping what it's doing to deal with something the board referred to it. So that's something you can keep in mind for the future, but I think more meetings like this would be an excellent idea.
thank you, Mr. Connick. Is there any other discussion or any other action you need from either of us, either the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors this evening, Mr. Curry?
Not a person.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda, if there's no other comment, is the adjournment of the Planning Commission.
I ask for a motion of the commission to adjourn.
I move. I so move.
There's a second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I hereby close the meeting of the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Light. And we're on to the adjournment of the Board of Supervisors. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Are you going to continue to 11:16?
Yes, thank you.
Motion to continue the meeting to 11:16, November 16th.
Was that a motion, Mr. Frazier?
Yes. So that's 6 p.m. here at our CES.
Yes, please, thank you. Let's adjourn this meeting to the 16th of November here at our CES at 6 p.m. We have a motion from Mr. Frazier. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Donahue. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Wait a minute, we have to adjourn our meeting, I think, too.
Mr. Connick,
Do you want us there on the 16th?
Mr. Connick, Mr. Light took care of that for you. You've been adjourned.
I can't really hear very well.
We adjourned, David.
Bye.